Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk about Dead by Daylight. Specifically, the highs and lows of the past year of DBD, because it's been one hell of a year. Last year I covered the best and worst of Dead by Daylight's 6th year, and it was one of my favourite videos of last year. So I thought revisiting it as we approach DBD's 7th anniversary could be a lot of fun. I'm sure we've all got nothing but good things to say about the past year of content, right? But before we start talking about Dead by Daylight's 7th anniversary, let's talk about a whole different celebration, because this video is brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends, who just celebrated their 4th anniversary and you can get in on the action. You might know Raid Shadow Legends is the hit mobile RPG with hundreds of thousands of players across the world, and I'm here today to tell you about something very special. As the game's anniversary kicks off, it's party season, and Raid's massive and diverse range of champions offer a wide variety of potential guests. Of course, someone as discerning and classy as me could only have the most discerning and stylish guests. They say you should dress for the job you want, and Bellinor, Canoness, Theurgist and Excruciator certainly look dressed to impress. I mean, who wouldn't want to party with someone called Excruciator? This April an egg hunt is taking place at Raid, but these aren't your normal eggs, oh no. We got dragon eggs on the menu, baby. Just download Raid Shadow Legends using the links below, copy your in-game player ID, and head on over to egghunt.plarium.com. Whack in your player ID and you can get started on this exciting AR adventure. Scour the dragon's lair using your phone, and if you find the hidden egg, you'll be in with a chance to win a huge variety of prizes, anything from a legendary Raid champion to Amazon gift cards. Existing Raid players shouldn't feel left out either. Go to egghunt.plarium.com for a promo code so you can enjoy lots of something special as well. New players can use my link down below or the QR code on screen right now to enjoy a free starter pack that contains some handy dandy loot to start you off on Raid. And once you've got it, you can find me with the username PixelWishYT and you can join my clan. On that note, I guess I'll see you out there. So let's start off here with something good that happened in the past year of Dead by Daylight, and it's probably my favourite thing to happen to the game in the past year. Massive steps forward in the game's UX accessibility. UX, or user experience, is a catch-all term for the quality and smoothness of a user interacting with the system, and DBD has made leaps and bounds in this past year. Accessibility is a part of it, and the recent visual terror radius coupled with the accessibility menu that allows players to customise their own experiences to their needs are fantastic inclusions that really modernise the game, but there's a lot of more general purpose UX improvements too, like the ability to access your tome challenges while you're in the queue, to have separate challenges going on for Killer and Survivor at the same time, the in-game challenge tracker, and the HUD updates the game has had over the past year all fall under the UX umbrella. And I'm putting this first because more than any other change in the past year, even if you've hated every single other thing behaviour has done, UX and accessibility improvements are an objective good for the players of this game, and it should be celebrated. Genuinely, UX in gaming is so underappreciated, and DBD's UX team have been at the top of their game lately. I know some people at Behaviour watch my videos on the matter, and if any of you are watching this, go buy Steph and the rest of the UX team a drink or something. They damn well deserve it. The other pretty much unquestionable objective major good from Behaviour this year is to do with the game's economy, both in terms of the blood point economy and the availability of cosmetics. The BP economy has improved tremendously in the past year. The fact that we're at a point now where having too many blood points to effectively spend is a problem is insane to me, especially given the game's history of being pretty stingy with the blood point grind. It all started with the great perk update of patch 6.1.0, which saw the blood point modifiers from Barbecue and Chili and We're Gonna Live Forever taken away so their usage rates weren't inflated by the increased blood point incentive to run those perks. Side note, I don't particularly like that We're Gonna Live Forever got a compensation buff, and a really fucking good one at that, but Barbecue didn't, especially since Aura Blocker perks also got buffed in that patch, which made Barbecue worse, while getting We're Gonna Live Forever stacks actually became easier, with base kit BT letting you farm your teammates for stacks. But regardless, the removal of the BP gained from these perks also brought a change to the prestige system, that made a character's teachables unlock across every character in the roster when you prestige them high enough, meaning that if you've got a new Killer or Survivor you could just P3 them and get all their perks tier 3 on every new character, without having to traverse through 30 different blood webs to get them on everybody. While this new prestige system did help to future-proof the teachable perk mechanic against the huge number of killers and survivors that the game wasn't really designed to accommodate, the lack of the BP boosters from the perks meant the actual time played to blood points earned to perks and items acquired ratios were about the same or even worse than the old system. So Behaviour decided to iterate further and made some great changes to give us a much more liberal approach to blood point gain. The prices of everything in the blood web was tanked across the board. The empty slots on the free track of the Rift Pass started to give out blood points and the BP cap doubled to 2 million, meaning suddenly players' blood points went much further than they used to and they were gaining them faster. This meant players could demolish blood webs and get high prestige characters very quickly, all but eliminating most of the problems of getting new perks from new characters and allowing certain high dedicated players to reach as high as prestige 100 on their favourite characters. The only trouble here is actually sitting through all the blood boy animations enough to spend those millions of new blood points, which proves so time consuming that Behaviour has now added an auto blood point spender tool in the recent update. The fact that BPs are now so plentiful that we literally can't hold all our blood points is fantastic and all but halts the grind problem that DBD used to be notorious for. A massive success that came out for Dead by Daylight this year. Similarly, the cosmetic economy also improved a lot this year, although less so than the BP economy, and we can see that with the winding back of cosmetic sets that were all the rage in the prior year or two of DBD. While we still get linked sets and new skin releases, they are far less frequent than they used to be, with them only really being used anymore for radical model changes that you typically find in ultra rare or legendary skins that change a character completely, as opposed to them being pretty arbitrary like they used to be. A great example here can be seen in the Alice in Wonderland collection. The only linked set in the whole thing is the Jabberwocky skin for the artist, which, yeah, no shit, that had to be a set. But everything else is normally separated cosmetic pieces, and that's part of a concerted push to soften the DVD community's relationship towards sets. Make no mistake, if they'd made these skins a couple of years ago, I have no doubt that Kate's Alice skin would have been a full set. And I can say this because the Oktoberfest skin that she had a couple of years ago is almost exactly the same structurally and was packaged as a set for no discernible reason. The Deep Rift was another new feature this year, giving dedicated players who complete the Premium Rift quickly a share of new cosmetics so you get more bang from your buck from buying the Rift Pass, which certainly isn't a bad thing and is only getting better with more changes to it in the new mid-chapter. In addition, a new policy from Behaviour was instituted that all original cosmetics will be available for Eerie shards a month after they come out, which is fantastic for all the invested players out there like me, with a few billion shards and nothing to do with them, because it finally gives us an outlet to get new interesting outfits without spending a penny. I burned 10,000 or more Eerie shards as soon as I could to get a load of fresh fits for Skull Merchant and Haddie, characters that I like a lot but wasn't ready to spend actual money on, so giving me options to spend Eerie shards on anything in their collections was a godsend. Although it's important to remember that not every cosmetic change this year was a good one. Most notably the introduction of limited time cosmetic windows and especially their applications to older skins in the store. With the Eerie Shards change came the news of limited time cosmetics. The DBD's annual events would bring with them limited time skins that would cease to be purchasable outside of those events, meaning the window to buy them is limited and if you miss it, have to wait the whole year for it to come back round again for a chance to get them again. This plays on the fear of missing out, or FOMO, and pushes players to spend money they might not have done otherwise to get this limited supply item because they worry they might not get the chance to do so again. It's now or never. This is a pretty skeevy thing to do with new skins, but I don't think I'd care about it enough to put it in this video if it was just the new ones. After all, this is kind of the new normal for live service games these days. What really irks me is that this retroactive application of this philosophy to older cosmetics that happened to fall into the seasonal release windows in the past. Suddenly skins that were available for years just disappeared from the store, locked away until the next event brings them back. This is particularly brutal for characters who happen to release in the seasonal windows. Artists and Twins, for example, both release in the winter, and as a result the skins they got on release were winter themed, which meant they were earmarked as seasonal skins and have been removed from the store. Okay, a quick aside here, it turns out I've done a bit of a fucky-wucky on this one, because the artist skin is not actually restricted. It's part of the Everlasting Frost collection, which is different from the Cozy Break collection that got restricted from that year. Which is odd because the Cozy Break collection was released only a week after Everlasting Frost, but Cozy Break is restricted and Everlasting Frost isn't. The only reason I can think as to why that is because in Everlasting Frost there was a Ghostface skin, which might cause issues with restricting it because it's a licensed character. So Carmina may have just gotten lucky that her release skin didn't get restricted because it happened to coincide with the Ghostface skin. A better example of characters who've been released in an event only to have their event items restricted are Hattie and Dredge, who released during the anniversary of last year, and Michaela, who released in Halloween 2021. All of these characters had event skins as their release skins that have since been restricted, so they've all kind of suffered from this a little bit. Carmina didn't really, because she just got lucky. At least Artis has received a constant supply of new skins since she came out. After all, she was the only original killer released in Year 6 of DBD, so it makes sense that she would get so many. But Twins have only had 3 skins since they came out, and until literally a week ago when their Rift skin got taken out of the vault, they only had 1 available for purchase. A killer that came out 2.5 years ago only had 1 skin that you could buy, because the other ones were either marked retroactively as a seasonal skin and removed from the store, or were locked in the archives and wasn't available in the store for almost a year after it first came out. If you think about this policy for more than, 4 seconds, you realise just how daft it is. And it was coupled with a year that displayed more favouritism from behaviour with which characters get cosmetics and which don't than any year prior. Last year they had a bit of an excuse. They only have 3 new original characters to cater to, so they can't do what they wanted. But this year has had more original characters than any year in DBD history, and it's really obvious which characters' behaviour is choosing to market and which they're choosing to forget. For killers, it makes a bit more sense to be discerning as to which characters you give skins to. Nobody will play Twins whether you give them a skin every patch or not, so it makes sense to cater more to the majority, even if it doesn't really, favour me. But for survivors who are really just skins themselves, it seems pretty asinine to favour some over others so obviously when a big reason many survivors get played in the first place is because they have nice outfits to choose from. Let's compare the 2 new original survivors that aren't brand new so far, Vittorio and Hattie. Vittorio released with the normal collection of outfits including 2 green, 2 purples, the shirtless ones, but shortly afterwards also received a Lunar New Year outfit, 2 new outfits in the tome he got, and a Techwear outfit on top of that. Meanwhile, Hattie released with no green rarity skins at all. Only 1 purple rarity, which was a linked set unlike Vittorio's, the anniversary skin, and only got her missing greens several months later. One as a Prime Gaming reward to boot. And the cosmetics that she had on release weren't even finished. Her yellow rarity head options were basically paying for nothing to change at all, and even her hair was blue for some reason, instead of the white it was in her lore and key art. All of this required her to eventually get a mini visual rework recently that gave her actual head cosmetics, her white streak back, and a small roadmap from the devs to assure people that Hattie hadn't been totally forgotten. Let's move away from cosmetics and whatnot, get down to brass tacks and talk about the gameplay changes that we've seen in Year 7, because wow, there has been a lot. 6.1.0 marked a huge meta shift that pushed mainstay perks like Decisive Strike, Hex, Ruin and Pop Goes the Weasel out of relevance, while bringing in some new meta perks and some general killer buffs targeted to making low tier killers more effective. In that regard, 6.1.0 technically did what it was meant to do, at least when it came to the killer meta. It shook the metagame up significantly by gutting earned regression perks and making low-tier killers more viable through the power of Jane Kick, Perks like Corruption and Overcharge, combined with longer generator times overall. But in the curling of the monkey's paw into a middle finger at the player base, this meta shift kinda caused more issues than it solved. The dry kick meta combined Call of Bride and Overcharge, 2 perks that encourage the killer to pick a 3 gen at the start of the game and kick the gens over and over instead of taking chases, with Eruption, a perk that could disable survivors for almost half a minute for working on generator the killer had kicked every time they got it down. Eruption was blatantly overtuned and got brought in line with the release of the Tools of Torment chapter, removing Incapacitated altogether in favour of momentary aura reading. But if anything, it has made the problem even worse, because now the only perk that enabled killers to commit to the chase suddenly didn't exist, while the 2 perks that enabled the turbo dry kicks in the first place were as strong as they ever were. You could throw Eruption into any killer build and it would be pretty good if you just kick gens whenever you had the chance. I ran Eruption as my only gen regression perk on Twins and actually had a lot of fun with it, even when I wasn't playing for 3 gens, and was just using it as a way to buy time, pick up down survivors, etc, etc. Call of Bride and Overcharge were a very different beast, because they only got most of their value if you played in a very particular way that was so unskilled and uninteractive, it more or less demanded that you remove your frontal lobe before you started, so your brain doesn't shut down from inactivity. Here's my handy 3-step guide to using Call of Bride and Overcharge in your matches. Step 1. kick the gen. Step 2, wait for Call of Brain to tell you to kick the gen again. Step 3, kick the gen again. You've now played Dead by Yellow for most of Year 7, and it was quite likely the most unhealthy gen regression meta we've ever had. It was fundamentally anti-gameplay, punishing survivors for not spending their time harassing the killer's 3-gen 24/7, and punishing the killer for doing anything that wasn't obsessively kicking every gen in the 3-gen until survivors died from boredom. The Tools to Torment mid-chapter finally put this horrific meta to rest, after about 9 months of dominance, and it's proved to be a real pain point of the past year as killers discouraged from participating in the game altogether, since incentives to chase and down survivors just disappeared. And the thing is, a cursory look at these perks, barring eruption, should tell you why they weren't meta before. Actively pushing to make these kinds of unearned regression perks meta was always going to do this, and the overcharge buff was honestly the statement of intent that put us in this really unpleasant situation. First boil over and then this. Behaviour should really think about the consequences of gigabuffing the most dismally unfair and unearned perks in the game to be also the best ones. Perks that punish players for taking basic game actions like taking chases or picking survivors up need to be implemented very carefully, because they promote, effectively, non-games. That's what meta has been for most of this past year. It's made Survivor horrible, it's made Killer horrible, if you're not taking the trip into the realm of the gen kick Andy, and I'm glad this new mid-chapter is finally taking it out to pasture. But as miserable as this new meta was, both its inception and its demise showed us something pretty important that was a major high point for this year. Year 7 of DBD was a year of great experimentation by the devs. In this time you've had not just one but two big dedicated meta shake-up patches, alongside the finisher more consistent system in PTB, some power and perk designs that are utterly unlike anything we've seen before, and a return to aggressively balancing new and existing killers after killer maintenance kind of stopped being a thing during Year 6. Over the years, Behaviour developed a not great reputation when it came to taking feedback between the PTB and live. Chances are whatever you saw on the PTB would make it to live servers. Maybe some game-breaking bug would get fixed or an easy exploitable add-on combo would get nerfed, but for the most part, what you saw was what you got. This started to change with the release of Wesker when they just his collision once or twice, but only really became noticeable when the night arrived when it received a windfall of buffs between his PTB and his live release, and then again between his live release and his mid-chapter. Skull Merchant got the same treatment, constant maintenance to ensure she released properly. Well, okay, it was damage control, so everyone fucking hated her, but nevertheless, it was a lot of changes they made in quite a short period of time. And it isn't just a new killers either. 2023 marks the year that Nurse finally fell from her pedestal as the best killer in the game, with her blink attacks turned into special attacks, so she wouldn't get value from exposed perks and her add-ons were nerfed to boot. Which in combination with the new meta changes, actually takes it out of the top spot for the first time in the game's history. In general, Year 7 was the year that so many of DBD's oldest and nastiest bugbears were finally slain. Nurse, Dead Hard, Decisive Strike, Circle of Healing, Hex Ruin, all knocked down a peg this year, after they were all hardcore meta literally from the day they came out. It's evidence of a new and more ambitious approach to game balancing from Behaviour, and it certainly kept the game feeling interesting and fresh compared to the snail's pace of balance updates we were getting before. Even the dreaded gen kick meta only lasted 9 months, by far the shortest of any killer meta we've ever had, even though it felt like it was around forever. I seriously hope the spirit of aggressively changing things and making a new meta every 10 minutes is carried forward into Year 8. It's been one of the biggest hallmarks of this year. Well, mostly, because while the killer meta has been shaken up significantly, the survivor meta remained much more stable by comparison and only really got changed substantially with the most recent mid-chapter patch. Prior to this new mid-chapter, Dead Hard went from being the best survivor perk in the game to being still the best survivor perk in the game. Unbreakable proved myself as Sprint Burst weren't touched and still won't be, and Circular Healing proved to be incredibly resilient to Behaviour's attempts to nerf it. Until the Tools of Torment mid-chapter, the only significant meta changes for Survivor were BT falling out of favour because of the endurance adding to the base kit, and one staple anti-tunnel perk being replaced with another staple anti-tunnel perk. Fortunately, the Tools mid-chapter has done a lot to encourage Survivor build diversity and push the game away from the super turbo giga healing meta that we've been in for ages, especially since Circle's release though. I do wish it happened sooner however. So a pretty stagnant survivor meta combined with a redegenerate killer one has been a pretty substantial black mark against DBD this year. I'd also like to draw attention to the fact that Year 7 has been a pretty buggy year for this game. Year 6 was relatively stable, especially after the buggy mess that was Year 5, but Year 7 has been an unwanted return to form for buggy releases. Nowhere near as bad as 5, mind you, but still far from great. Forge and Fog especially was a very buggy chapter, and many of the bugs went unfixed for ages. The Twins bugs especially have been real pain points for me personally, as they were effectively unplayable for almost 2 months straight. And it hasn't really helped that behaviour is super reluctant and inconsistent with their use of the kill switch. Nurse's bugs took it out of the game for weeks due to the kill switch, singling things like Obituary Obsession when that was bugged. But Merciless Storm has been bugged for ages with no kill switch in sight, and Twins weren't kill switched either, even though they were hard locking players out of matches. Honestly, it's been less the quality or quantity of bugs, but rather how long it's been taking behaviour to fix them that's really been irritating. Something that a DDoSing problem has also gotten under my skin about. I'm not mad that it's happened. Shit happens. I'm mad it's lasted as long as it has, and apparently hasn't been properly fixed. How disappointing. But it's time to cover the things that I'm sure you guys have really wanted me to talk about this entire time, and that's the year's chapters. The 4 chapters of Year 7 were Roots of Dread, starring the Dredge and Hadi Core, Project W, starring Wesker, Ada and Rebecca, Forge and Fog, starring the Knight and Vittorio Toscano, and Tools of Torment, starring the Skull Merchant and Talita and Hanato Lira. Let's start out with something controversial. Roots of Dread, best chapter of the year. It gave us Hadi, a character who we've been waiting on for years, and she's great, really living up to the hype even if she was kind of forgotten since then. It gave us the Dredge, a kind of prequel to Spark of Madness that tied together the Black Veil and the backstory of the Doctor in DBD's first original non-human killer, and a really unique kind of power. The map was garbage and the perks are pretty bad, but holy fuck, the characters of Roots of Dread absolutely carry this year. Big fan of the chapter. I know a lot of people will not appreciate that opinion though. So let's talk about Project W, because this was the fan favourite chapter of the year without a doubt. It gave us Wesker, it gave us Ada and Rebecca, it gave us a dozen new Resident Evil characters during and after the chapter's release, and legendary cosmetics. Both are Horde survivors from throughout RE1 to RE5, and legendaries for Legion and Blight to turn them into Hunk and William Birkin respectively. And all of these were done with new voice lines and lobby music on top of a rework to RPD, and even Blighted Wesker that came with the Halloween event. There's just so much for RE fans love about Project W. And it definitely helps that Wesker has the best received power of the year by far. You give DBD players the ability to dash real fast with passive slowdown, and throw people around the map. That's a recipe to make the game's most popular killer hands down. People fucking love Wesker, to the point that when I say I'm kind of mid on him, and to me, I prefer Roots of Dread as a chapter this year, I'm pretty sure I can hear the knives sharpening literally as I'm saying these words. Wesker was an absolute rampant success. Even though I don't like his power, the character, and especially the game that he comes from, I have to attest Project W was a great chapter. A huge step up from the Resident Evil chapter last year, and perfectly setting Capcom and behaviour up to turn DBD's Resident Evil adventures into a trilogy. Come on, you all know what I'm waiting for, just give it to me. So with the first 2 chapters of the year being pretty brilliant, DBD was off to a strong start to Year 7, and then the other 2 arrived. Forge and Fog and Tools of Torment has to be probably one of the most underwhelming chapter pairs in the game's history. Up there with Leatherface and Nightmare on Elm Street, and Shadow Bloodline Darkness Among Us. Both killers had vastly unpopular powers to play against that encouraged the Turbo 3-gen playstyle that the new meta had thoroughly ensconced. The perks were either useless or encouraged really unhealthy gameplay, and Vittorio and Skull Merchant had some really undercooked lore to boot. I know Tools of Torment got most of the hate due to Skull Merchant being able to hold 3-gens really easily, her general lack of appeal to killer players, and some elements of her design that didn't get on well with a lot of people, but I actually think Forge and Fog is a significantly more harmful chapter in the long run, and deserving a lot of the hate that Tools ended up receiving. The Lira siblings are highly charming characters, with really good lore and a ton of effort put into realising them appropriately, unlike some survivors I could mention. Skull Merchant's tone story was far better than any stories Forge and Fog brought, And in general, the chapter is another interesting high-concept project that had issues in implementation, but is at least unique enough to be interesting to talk about, because of all its oddities and problems and quirks, just like all Kill or Portrait of Murder that came before it. Forge and Fog, on the other hand, was a really hard chapter to fuck up thematically. All of the successes that it had, like the visual design of the knight, and the general tone and style of the chapter, were all things we'd seen before. The only unique element is the use of AI for the guards, which, let's be honest, they're just fast Nemesis zombies. That's all they really are, and the end result of the knight's gameplay design is you get Artist without all the cool stuff that comes with Artist. He's much easier, much weaker, and kind of plays himself, unless you choose to hamstring yourself by choosing not to zone with him. I think his similarity with Artist is why I actually enjoy playing him to start off with, but dear god did he get old fast when I realised that if I wanted to play Artist, I could just play Artist. Skull Merchant is irritating with 3-gen perks, I know that, but that meta has been killed now. Without them, she's just a pretty shit killer. Like, not particularly irritating, she's an M1 killer with info and some slowdown, and she's just not very good. Knight, on the other hand, will always be a design nightmare. He will always just be easier and worse Artist, and that's so disappointing. Tools of Torment has its issues, don't get me wrong, but Forge and Fog lacks the diamonds in the rough that Tools had in places, in favour of just being a turgid, lukewarm porridge of mid. It aged like a Hydrogen 7 isotope, and had the impact of a shark in a public swimming pool. It was disappointing, and sadly always will be. And while I understand people who say that Tools of Torment is the worst chapter, I don't see a reason not to put Forge and Fog in particular on the list of Year 7's worst features. But before I wrap up, there's one more absolutely dire new addition to the game that I have to talk about, and it's Year 7's maps. Both the reworks and the new maps have been absolutely dogshit. Garden of Joy and Borgo were actually designed by Satan, the Red Forest rework somehow made Mother's Dwelling even better for Survivor, RPD was neither better nor worse, which is to date the lowest bar ever set for anything in human history, and Shelter Woods got its problems of big dead zones and lack of balanced landing spots for Survivor pretty much removed, but the map is now an old Ormond-esque abomination for Killer, just like every other map that came out this year. The only map that got better in a meaningful way was Eyrie of Crows, a very strong map for Survivor still, but far, far better to play on than it was before. And I'm still a little unsure how to call the new Autohaven changes, so I guess we'll see, but aside from those, Eyrie and Temple, which is still, like, fine, the map design this year has been various flavours of terrible. I genuinely don't know what's wrong with DBD's map design team, because it feels like they're just going backwards at this point. So many bad maps, and due to only one realm being left from the Realm Beyond project, I don't think they're getting changed anytime soon either. So that little downer of an ending just about covers everything great and everything grim about DBD's Year 7. We had a pretty good start with Roots of Dread and Project W, closing us in with a meta shake-up that, while welcome at the time, turned out to be a bit of a poisoned apple. As this new meta started to grate with players, back-to-back original chapters that didn't really capture players' attention, beat many people down, and killed a lot of enthusiasm for this game, meaning its upcoming 7th anniversary has a lot to prove to players and needs to win back the crowd. Fortunately, the prevailing rumours suggest that a big license is coming this anniversary, with a few sources suggesting that we should expect Alien, which would be massive, both for winning back players who disengaged with the game lately, and for me personally, because the Alien video I did back in December would likely get popular again, which, you know, that'd be pretty cool too. Whatever it is, it had better be good, because the patience this community has for behaviour right now is very, very low. And while this new mid-chapter is pretty great, it needs to be followed up on with a strong anniversary. Year 7's been an odd one. Between the DBD board game finally arriving in players' hands, the upcoming Legion comic, the DBD movie in production, and the possibility of some really exciting licenses just around the corner, something tells me we're in for an exciting future. So those are my thoughts on everything that was good or bad about the last year of Dead by Daylight. The anniversary livestream is in just a few weeks, so were you excited? And what do you reckon were the best and worst bits of the last year in your opinion? I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. And while you're down there, feel free to do all the engagement-y, subscribe-y, comment-y stuff that you people normally like to do, and if you really like me, do consider joining the Patreon. And my all-star patrons, who I love completely, help keep the lights on over here and are absolutely excellent. They get to see my videos a day early, and have access to a ton of other sweet perks, access to the exclusive Discord chat. So if you feel like chipping in, then the link's in the description. As for what that next video is going to be, well, I'll need to cover Skull Merchant's lore very soon because I've got a lot of opinions on her new tome story, but first I have a potential problems video to make, and suffice to say, I've been looking forward to this one for a while. Guess I'll see you then.